Hey guys, I'm Swapnil, and I'm gonna basically go through some of the lessons I learned, and I probably gonna keep with me for lifelong. I joined Yahoo as an SDK engineering manager, and then now I'm heading the same group. The fun fact for today is who helped me creating this presentation is my 4-year-old, and we'll introduce her later in one of the slides, like why she's more important when I prepared this presentation, but let's go through it. This is very familiar, right? As an app developer, when I am in some of the things that my PM comes to me and say, hey, we are losing the DAU. And I'm like, no, my app works perfectly. I have 100% of performance is passing on my test environment. And then he was like, no, but I can see that the user session time has decreased since last couple of months. And I was like, yeah, but my app was spotless. Try it out. I am on the company network. I am on 4G or 5G or LTE. And I was like, yeah, but then still, this thing is not adding up. And then we start thinking, are we actually collecting data and are we actually measuring the performance of the app correct? So that's where, the whole thing starts. Now, if you look from the user's perspective, and before even going there, if you think about it, like Dilbert is my favorite thing, right? I mean, probably the first thing I look up whenever, especially on the weekends. So you are almost ready to launch, and as a team you are working towards your launch. It's like, hey, are we ready for the beta users? It's like, no, maybe performance is not that important here, right? It even if it takes few more seconds to launch your app, probably fine, may crash, beta users understand, but then as you go towards your launch, you will be like, hey, are we really ready, right? Are we going to actually engage customers? And when engagement, as you mean, that they want to come back to your app every single day, right? I mean, you don't want to one-off users who come in and go off, they finish their work. I think that's your side of the story. But then security engineers, we call them paranoids, right? They are paranoid enough always, and they come back and it's like, did you actually secure our product? So there is always a tension between the product side of the things and security side of the things. But at the same time, the first and foremost, you don't need to lose focus on the users, right? So that's my talk today, being user first, but at the same time, developing for app performance. All right, so what matters to the users? Like what matters to my 4-year-old, as I was saying, or my mom or dad, right? You have different demographic and age group of the users, and what matters to them is app performance, right? And I'm gonna take a pause, and I'm gonna introduce my daughter. Her name is Shaima. She's 4-year-old, as I said, and this kind of stuck me. So as being a 4 year, she's very much into Peppa Pig, which is kind of a European thing, right? And then she's also interested in Dora and stuff. And the other day, she was like, "Hey, can you put Peppa Pig?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I was looking my remote. I was trying to turn my TV on. It was like, "I want to see Peppa Pig in YouTube." I was like, no, the show is already recorded on Amazon Video as well. And I was gonna go there, but she's like, no, my preference is to go to YouTube. And I was like, what happened? And in her broken English, she said, you know what, when we last time did that, it was just circle, circle, and circle. I was like, okay. So imagine my 4 year can develop that brand love and brand loyalty towards YouTube. And I'm not saying there is anything wrong between one service or the other. Probably on that fine day, my Comcast router has decided to not give enough bandwidth for that particular show. But user create their loyalty and their brand love pretty early in their cycle when they start adopting these applications. And the biggest learning point is if you can provide them app performance, they're gonna come back. If not, then they're gonna turn away. There's a lot of competitors out there. What's important when I look at the performance? There are three things, right? Basically, you're looking at latency, and then when I say latency, it's actually user perceived performance. It doesn't matter how many gazillion or million network calls you are making underneath, right? Whether your main thread is hogging or not, you're doing things off main thread in background thread or not. What it matters to them is their perceived latency, how fast they can get into the app. The second thing is stability, which is mainly crash rate. So first thing is when you app the launch, and the second thing is when you start using the app while you are in the app, what matters the most, which is stability, right? It should not crash. You should have user feedback. You also should have proper way of doing things in your background queues or not on the main thread, right? A lot of things. And then this third thing is battery performance. Who wants to turn their phone into a hot powerhouse kind of a thing, right? I mean, user will go light away even when the hardware and other things are increasing in the capabilities. Battery is always the main concern, right? Because you want to last that battery for about 24 hours. today itself, the thing that I'm going to focus on the highlighted stuff, whatever I learned from like the app performance in the user perceived latency side. You are an user, like I mean, I daily habit like I go in the morning and go through like my finance, I look at my portfolio, I go through Google News, I go through Yahoo Mail, I go through my corporate mail, a bunch of things, right? So as a user, you come in. I just want to introduce like you tap on the finance app, it opens up. The first thing you see is like launch screen, right? You're engaging the user that hey, something is going to come up which is going to interest you or what you're looking for, and then a famous thing starts, which is spinning and spinning, which my daughter says, right? Circling things. And then some of the components, while they're fetching data off the network, maybe it's not pre-fetched or something earlier, and it starts like spinning somewhere else. That like you'll see like based upon time, day, and probably weather, you will see different spinners somewhere on your screen. And then at the end, you have a fully usable experience, right? Which is your portfolio is there. You can see like what the indexes are doing on that day. You will see some of the videos, news, and bunch of things, right? So why is it taking so long to get the content, right? If you actually look at the app layers from a different perspective, when you're 20 years of history, just like we have in Yahoo apps, right? You start developing one app and then you decide that hey, there will be some shared services like identity and push and payments and bunch of other things, right? And then you say, hey, you know what? I want to equip my finance app, my mail app, and my homepage app all with the news, and then you will make a shared component out of it, right? And then I showed here only four components, but it will just keep like creating those shared libraries or SDKs they call in mobile platforms, right? And then whole org is created called mobile platforms, and they will do all the shared services for you. Internally, app makes their own business decision that they call their own backend. All the services call their own backends as well, right? And they have their own cloud. And today, when we are like have a global concept, right? When you want to touch each and every user out in the world, a lot of these data centers are based off like in different locations, and all these services may not have presence in all the geographical regions, right? Some of them are on AWS for sure, but then if you're not using this approach and if you have on-premise, it's hard to afford to have like these data centers in every single region. So some of these services, like for us, identities and like US, and probably like we want to put some of the components in AWS, but then there is Europe, and then there is in India or APAC. But at the end, like do you know whether ads has the same data centers? Probably not, right? And all these calls, when you start your app, fires off, and they go to different data centers, and then they like do their own things, come back and try to create this one launch screen or home screen experience for you, right? And I think that's the reason why like we learned out of our experiences, and actually Verizon or Yahoo, AOL, Tumblr, TechCrunch, all these subsidiary that created one group called Verizon Media. When you look at like that kind of a scale, the things are important is to standardize some of the processes. And the way you do it is like hey, if you are launching your app and make it usable within 1.5 seconds, users will love it. We're gonna come back, right? But if you go in the territory of 1.5 to 5 seconds, and they're like, probably it's gonna come up. Let me give it some more time, and then at some point, like if it probably someone didn't like my talk, but or they didn't agree with me, but or some app, and then if you go to like 5 seconds plus, it's like okay, you know what, leave it. I'm gonna come back, and the as I said, my daily habits, I'll close my app and I'll just go to my next app that my daily routine is, right? Whatever the next set of things that I want to do. And while doing all this, one lesson that I learned, and I put it like, very explicit ways, they're not gonna like, show their negative experience, or they're gonna not show like dissent or something. They're just gonna walk away. They're not gonna go to feedback like our App Store or Google Play Store and submit their feedback. They're gonna not reach out to you, but it's like what, let's just leave it right here, right? So you may or may not get any feedback from the user, and that's why it's like very important for you to actually get things right, especially on your launch. All right, so now it's a nice segue to turn into measuring the app performance. Why is it so hard, and how do we do it? So, well, it's not easy, right? I mean, especially when you are doing at the scale, it's not definitely that easy. And one of the things is, remember, like, connecting back to our first slide, that when you come and say, hey, my app is working spotless, yes, but it's running the tests on the very controlled environment. All your hardware are plugged in, or your devices are plugged in. It has nice, like, really, like, fiber optics level of Wi-Fi in your company, and you are not testing the real user scenario, right? And Bay Area so advanced. We have, like, 5G coming up, edge computing coming up, which, like, a lot of people are actually pioneering at, including Verizon. Well, at the end, looking at, like, APEC and other regions, for example, we're still living on 3G and 4G networks in a lot of areas, right? So when you are talking about globalization, like, one of the things very important is look at, like, what kind of network bandwidth layers you have, and kind of slice and dice data. You really want to go to a level where you want to make sure you're not creating bias because of the high-end devices or better networks while you are looking at data, right? So basically what you can do is you can go through the regions or geolocations, or you can do slice and dice data by devices. Like, for example, Pixel has definitely better performance some of the low-end motorizer or LG devices on Android, right, because of their capabilities. So you can do all these things, while one of the things that we learned is, as you said, standardization of processes is important. It needs continuous auditing, right? You need to continually look at what are the parameters changing. The world is changing so fast. The network capabilities, device capabilities, the regions, like availability of different kind of networking is really, really, really improving these days. And while everything is changing so fast, one of the very important thing is you continually look at, and as I say, like, slice and dice data based upon your parameters that you're looking at. Some of them, as I already talked, like, we looked at different device capabilities, hardware, network latencies or network levels, those kind of things. Right? So I'm just gonna skim through some of the slides. Please do a quick time check and let me know if you're cool. All right, so we are right on time. So on iOS side, one of the things, like, that a lot of people kind of measures data differently is, if you see, like, here, hopefully it's readable. Um, the one thing you want to see is, like, how fast you can go to the user, but then there are a lot of, like, I would say, like, chunks that you want to measure. The first thing is, like, OS launch time. Unfortunately, you cannot control that, right? When you start your app and until it goes to, like, the uh, app launch finish with loading, which is kind of callback that you get, until that time probably you cannot do anything, right? So speeding that up or measuring the data is not going to help you. The next thing is, while you launch the app, as you said, like, you are initializing a lot of services, initializing a lot of shared components, making a lot of backend calls, your remote config, you are trying to get some values out of network, a lot of things that you are doing. And plus you have cache, so you are trying to load all these things that matters, because now you really need to get into a level where you can identify, like, hey, this component is actually causing the performance or cold start time increased on my app, because they are making, like, making calls on the main thread, or they're doing something that they should not be doing, like, or while getting the user, they can always, like, use the cache, right? And then they give a user feedback saying, hey, the user is logged out or something, right? So a lot of things you can do, and then from that point, you want to put your home screen on, and you want to start measuring that how much time it's taking creating their own UI components, the animations and whatnot, right? So we are slicing and dicing each and every single point of this data, and the way we did it is we actually crowdsource everything. So what we learned out of all our, I would say, like, lessons or mistakes, that controlled environments are not a good measure of measuring your app performance or cold start. And the only way to do it is you put it out there, not only our beta users but all the users, and be really mindful of sampling those data, right? You have hopefully user consent and all the privacy is taken care of, but after that, whatever the data you get, be mindful about when you can send. You can queue it up on the app until you have a good Wi-Fi connection or something, but when you send it, use that data for cold start, battery, and your app performance measures, right? And then similar thing for Android. I'm just gonna skim through this slide, but again, it's the same concept. You basically don't want to just look at activity on create and on resume, but you want to get like each and every single piece of data from where OS starts or app launches to your shared services to your actual view to your animations, and then when the app becomes usable. All right, so going back to my cartoons. What is that one single thing that I learned out of 6 years working on so many apps and going through war rooms and got like late night calls from my executives, right? The one thing that I learned and I wish I will knew before is fetch all the content you have in the user viewpoint, prepare something that user can go to that viewpoint as fast as possible, right? So just to give you a couple of examples, you might have like very simple content oriented app where you here I'm just presenting like Yahoo Mail app. It has only mail content, right? And probably a single endpoint which gets you all the content. On the other side, you have like we have taken an example of finance, and finance is doing a lot of things. If you see, this is completely different view than my portfolios because with very user driven view, and then we have some of the videos and we have some of the ads in between, and then if you go took a look at bottom, it has news and bunch of other things, right? What's important is what's in your viewpoint, and you want to prepare that fast. And the way we did it, and I think that it's not a magic, right? I mean, you can do everything that uh, the people do, like use tools and look at app performance and everything. But the one thing that saved us a lot of time is reduce the network a number of network calls that you need to make. The reason it's very simple, right? If you have one network call going to a data center and it's actually forking like few more calls to get all these ads and identity and video and news and everything, right? Those calls are inter data center calls. Even if they are inter data center or intra data center, they're going to be faster than the user can experience those calls on 3G or 4G network, right? So the first thing first is like make one call that actually gives you, it can spawn to multiple microservices and whatnot, but at the end you should collect all the data and give it to you so that you can do a lot of things in one call, so that user can have perceived latency measures like pretty much summed up to just one network call, right? And then I have some nice to haves, like you can use app cache, you can have background fetch that you have like periodic background fetch on iOS or something. You can use silent notifications. On Android, everything is silent, so you can use that to prepare your data even before the user launches the app, right? The network layer optimization that Subodh is going to go through like in more details, and what Codeware does as well. And then user feedback for making sure like that user is not just hung on something. They have some feedback, spinners, dots, whatever the way you want to present it. But at the end, what matters is fetching content that fits in your viewpoint in your home screen, right? Cool. So I think that's all I have to present. We'll have the slides shared, right? I mean, I'm just making it curated through the company. Once it's available, I can put it on SlideShare and give it to you. And feel free to reach out to me for any questions.
So I do relate to the children experience. I believe that children are like the most honest users. Like I still remember my 9-month-old still not walking, climbing to the TV and sliding, and she was very very upset of the fact that the TV did not slide. So I do have one question for you. So don't run away. I was curious about. So you collect a lot of data from in the field, so from real users. Do you use that data in any way so that you can mimic user conditions before launching? And if you do, do you use that in, for example, developing processes like integration testing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So basically, we do that, right? So we call it sampling data. We sample some of these things, and we can actually like create a real mix that kind of works well with our audience. And basically we look at like high and low end and like mid range, both network as well as like the devices, and we run on them like on a basis. So as I said, like the median is not a good way because it creates a bias for you, right? Because if 70% of people on the planet has already high end devices, then you're gonna ignore those results from the 30% of the users, right? So what we do is we sample data, we actually create a feedback loop which actually mimic those same experiments. We do have in-house device lab, something we call, which has a different variety of devices, actual devices, and we simulate some of the network conditions based upon what iOS and Android gives you, and some of them, like, are actually putting the test hooks within the code, right? Only compile it out with the macro or something, but actually put that code in, so that what it does is, like, it tries to mimic some of the network conditions. So even if the response is faster, we try to make sure, like, that we don't give it to the UI or something, and make sure it's not crashing, right? So yes, and it's all part of the CI/CD pipeline. So we don't like differentiate between desktop and mobile as, like, two different entities. All our mobile drops, including all the library drops, also should be high quality, and so it runs first, like, all the function integration, and then it runs through the cold start time, and cold start measures are good, then it will go through actual real world conditions and simulate each and every of them, right? All these things run in parallel on different devices, and at the end, if the pipeline is blue, that means everything is good. If it's not blue, that just means that you broke something, and before anyone else identifies that, you should be, like, fixing that. So yes, we do it. We do use them. We do collect them. We do make sure that the PII is gone from this if we are sampling based upon user or something, or the geolocations, and we just use them after removing the PII.
So I'm not sure if anyone else has another question.
Normally, we can relate this. Yeah, sorry guys. Normally, when I believe we can relate this, is that every time you want to develop a feature, you have like this triangle of responsibility, right? We have the guy responsible for the product that defines the feature. You have the engineer that actually implements the feature, and then of course you have the designer that designs the experience of the feature itself. And at least as being as an engineer, our point of view normally is trying to do the feature as best as possible, as fast as possible. But normally the design guy doesn't like this approach. He likes something more beautiful. He wants an animation. He wants that splash screen to last for exactly 2 seconds because it's cool. It showcases our brand, his logo, his background movement, his flow of wind or anything. So in your opinion, how can we manage these desires of slowdowns, purposefully slowdowns with purpose, like from the designer guys, with the need for speed that engineers normally have?
Well, I think it's a tough question to answer. This reason is the reason why you are animating is because you want to slow down the user. Really, right? I mean, animation does nothing but it gives you or buys you more time as an engineer to do something before, like, it completes and you have, like, kind of data available. Well, I think that there's always healthy debates, right? I'm not denying that fact that there is, like, designers have their own, like, view of the world, and then engineers have their own view of the world, right? And the way I think that we fine tune it is, there are two things, like, is one of the thing is, like, hey, whether it actually adds up to the user value and user feedback. So first thing we look at from that perspective. The second thing is definitely, like, if we learn from the experiences, we use that. The third thing is we try it out with user studies. So we do a lot of user studies, and we actually nullify some of the components which actually doesn't need. So yes, I mean, fine, on one fine day, my designer says, hey, I want to animate this thing, or I want to, like, put this jazz and flash logo, let's find out a strategy that if we can cache it, like, shouldn't be moved. One of the biggest problem with the client world is you cannot force users. It's not your server typical day-to-day work, right? And then especially when designers work in between or shared in between browser and native experiences, and they were like, oh, you know what, tomorrow we'll change it. Guess what? Be my guest, but we cannot do it, right? Even when you have auto downloading applications and things turned on, people may not like update their like, applications at all, right? So one of the things that we actually do is the user studies and a lot of focus on the users. The second thing is we time bound a lot of things, right? So as a part of, like, sprint planning, we make sure that they understand, or it's our job to make them understand why some of the things or some out of this world ideas are not possible, but, like, we can ship it as a next layer or something. And then one of the things I wish that I think some of you guys also would agree to me is in some of the next versions they actually provide dynamically loading the assets, right? Some of the launch screens and whatnot. If there is something like that happens, then it's going to make this debate very easier. But to sum up, user studies, uh, like whatever the performance is and why we are doing it is really important. Third thing, we can test it out, so we put it out in actually alpha and beta users, and before that even dog food within the company. The company has 10,000 people, should have really good feedback. We do some of the cafe studies as well, and after that if we agree, then we go for it, and then we time bound the approach as well. And if we go out, then we start measuring whether it actually increasing engagement, and that data helps you kind of push back next time when someone comes with you with their own view of the world, saying, hey, this is what is important, but hey, you know what, we shipped exact same feature in payments and it didn't drive any user engagement, then why we want to do it for identity or for push or whatever other services or app that we are looking for. Does it answer your question?
Now, Subab,